In class this past week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, honestly, I'm not exactly sure, but I ran across a quote by Dr. Ernest Holmes, our founder, that really struck me. In fact, it may be my favorite quote to date of his. He said that there was a time people thought the earth was flat. Now, it was actually round, but people's consciousness was at a place where the earth was flat. And it took almost 2,000 years for people to come around to the fact that actually it's round, which it always was. And during that period of time, particularly about 500 years ago, people fought over this and died over this. This was like tough stuff to wrap your head around. The fear and courage and all that went on around making that kind of shift to where the default becomes the world is round. Now, there are still flat earthers in the world. There probably always will be. But there was a default of consciousness that there was a flat earth that shifted to a default of consciousness that it's round. But we didn't create the round earth, it was always there. We just didn't have the consciousness to see it. And I see that all the time. And so one of the things that happened after we found that quote, Ash and I, we have started to call each other out. Oh, you're flat earthing it, man. You know, oh, I'm really worried we don't have enough money. You're flat earthing it, man. Oh, I'm really worried about what's going on in the States. You're flat earthing it, man. You know, whatever it is you want to look at, if you're looking at it with the consciousness of this is all there is, what we see is what we get, that's flat earthing it. That is not rising to peeking behind the curtain and seeing what actually is going on here. And it's so hard. It's so easy. I mean, for me, it's incredibly easy to buy into that this is what's real. I mean, even in Zen, they call it the fundamental because it is, right? I love that great saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Doesn't really change what you're doing, but how you see it, how you're with it, right? When we got an illness, when we've lost our job, when a relationship is fallen apart. These are hard things. What's going on in the Ukraine, the Congo, all over the world? There is some really rough stuff going on. And there's being in that emotional pain and suffering. You know, I've learned just this, I mean, I've known this a long time, but something about it sunk in for me this week, that there is a huge difference between concern and compassion. But we confuse that all the time. We got to be concerned about this. And yet, if you're concerned about it, you've already lost. I was reading this great quote in my Zen just this morning, where it was saying that if you are feeling any concern at all, you have lost the ability to be awakened. But that doesn't mean you don't have compassion, care, or want to be of service. Right? They're not the same thing. It's just that when you go into that place of awakening, you of course are compassionate, caring, want to be of service, because you understand the suffering of others. But understanding and being compassionate for the suffering of others is not the same thing as being caught up in it, being hurt yourself by it. There are those that say the only way you can have empathy for others is if you feel their pain. right? From an awakened state, from peeking behind the curtain, I can tell you that I can know their pain and yet feel awakened. That both those things can exist. That that's really possible in our lives. It's not easy. And for all those who think that's not possible, I say to you, there was a time they thought the earth was flat. And so I've been looking at this a lot, and as I have promised you, I bring forth to you what my process is, what I'm going through, right? What's new for me and what comes up for me in all this. And so this is what's been coming up for me around all this, is a shift in how I view my job, right? How I've been viewing my job is one of being your spiritual leader, and part of that has been kind of managing things. And I realized, whoa, that's not my job. My job is to awaken myself as much as possible, to keep evolving me, and then share it with you. That's my job. That's it. And if I'm not doing my job, if I'm not evolving, then what do I got to share with you on Sunday? Right? And so this week has been, for me, a real shift in the difference between managing and leading. Because they're not the same thing. Right? And so it turns out I am terrible at not managing. I'm just awful at it. I have had at least 6 or 7 opportunities this week to not manage and didn't grab onto any of them. Including today at the beginning of the service. I mean, but I'm becoming more aware of it, right? And so that's the thing about our teaching. You come in here and we teach you about these practices that can support you in shifting your consciousness, and at first, the odds are you're going to be terrible at it, right? And being terrible at it might mean to you that this stuff doesn't work. Have you ever had an experience of that in your life? You go and do something, and you're just so bad at it, you're just like, then this is not for me. Because it would be easy for me to say it's not for me not to manage. Clearly, I like to manage, so I'm going to keep doing that. Because I'm fairly good at it. But then I don't get to evolve. I don't get to grow. If you just stay with what you're good at, you don't get to evolve. You don't get to grow. Right? Because that's what it takes. It takes looking at what it is your next step and recognizing the odds are you're not going to be good at it at first. I have been terrible at it this week. Just terrible. And I was like, okay. This is still my next step. That doesn't change my next step. It just means I got to keep practicing this stuff, to see behind the curtain, to see what's really going on here, to see and experience that which is beyond anything that our ego minds can imagine, takes a tremendous amount of practice and commitment. Because the first thing you got to do is actually believe that it's there, right? Your internal, what I like to call soul's intention, which is your GPS, your internal GPS, is doing its best every day to let you know that it's there, that there's something beyond that may feel crazy, may feel beyond your ability to comprehend. One of the things I'm learning more and more is comprehending is the booby prize, because now you're back in your ego mind. You've lost that sense of awe. There's no comprehending awe. There's no comprehending wonder. There's only comprehending reason. And like I said last week, reason does not take you to awe and wonder. It's beyond it. And so what we're looking for, what I'm looking for, is to get into a space where I'm experiencing this life, this fundamental world of chopping wood and carrying water in a space of awe and wonder in as many moments as I can. Now, it'd be cool if I pulled it off and had it for every moment, but I'll go with as many as I can get because it feels so darn different. When you're in that space of awe and wonder, whatever is going on in front of you feels differently. You know, if you come here and you learn these practices and you take them on for yourself, you're going to experience less suffering. That's going to happen. How much less suffering, it will depend on how much you practiced, right? My mentor, Dr. Barbara Waterhouse, she used to ask me, she says, how often do you practice? I said, once in a while. And said, so how often do you feel this sense of awe? And I said, once in a while. And she went, oh. You know? How do you bring it in when you're in that busy place in your life? How do you bring it in when your kids are acting out? How do you bring it in at the job when your boss is yelling at you? How do you bring it in when the world just seems so crazy? And it just seems like it's a boots on the ground moment and you got to behave in a particular way just to get through and get it done. But then at the end of the day, if you do it that way, you're exhausted. Or am I the only one? It's that sense of getting to a place of where you do this stuff. You still are doing it, but it shifts. It shifts. It's like what I was saying about chop wood and carry water. How you feel it, how it is on your body, right? Shifts. When you get into this deep place of this, there's more going on here. The fact that we are alive. The fact that we get to experience planet Earth is awesome. This is an adventure better than anything I've ever seen in any movie. Movies cannot depict the beauty and awe and excitement and strangeness and bizarreness that actually goes on in our lives. Or am I the only one that feels that way? You know, you can't write this stuff. It's just happening. But then if we get caught up in the drama, like the people on the screen do, oh no, Mr. Bill! And pretty much anybody under 50 doesn't get that reference. Back when Saturday Night Live first came on the air, one of the funniest things they did was they had the short films of this little dough puppet that they just destroyed. The things they did to that poor puppet were just incredible and hilarious. So anyway, that's the reference. What was I talking about? I remember. Awe and wonder. You know, and so we have these people who have come through the planet to remind us of this. Buddha, Jesus, but even more recently, Paul Gyatso. Now, I know you've heard me say, but just in case there's new folks in the room who have never heard of Paul Gyatso, he was a Tibetan monk who was tortured by the Chinese for 33 years every single day. This is not what you call a high quality of life. Every single day. When he was finally released, he had scars over 97% of his body, had no teeth because they'd put a cattle prod in his mouth. He had burns everywhere. And the Dalai Lama called him the most enlightened guy on the planet at the time. Because he came out, his eyes, his love of life was extraordinary through that. Ananta Kranti, she's in prison. They didn't even tell her when she'd get released. It was a Thailand prison. She's beaten and tortured and put to work and has this moment where she falls in the midst of that, recognizing the awe and wonder of life. And all of a sudden, in the midst of that, she is experiencing joy. So we look at our circumstances as if they're hard. And I'm not saying they're not and they don't feel that way. I'm just saying there are those people who have come to this planet for the express purpose of showing us what is actually possible. And so it's for us to want to look at that, to take it in, to think maybe this is possible. Maybe what I'm saying up here is actually possible. Instead of what we tend to do, which is just keep doing what we're doing. Keep seeing what we're seeing. Or if you're lucky enough to have a peek behind the curtain, think that was just an anomaly. That's not what's actually going on all the time. And so it's up to us, right, to open to that idea that, wait a minute, there really is a behind the curtain. There really is a deeper way of looking at whatever the circumstance. And that's the thing about it. It's whatever the circumstance. And so that's what came to me, that this is my job. And if I want to step, and so the thing that I have kept doing is manage. I manage this, I manage that, I step in here, I go, wait a minute, you're not doing that right, let's try it this way, or I step in over here and I do that. I'm really, really good at stepping in and telling people they're wrong and I'm right. I've gotten very good at that. And I realize now it's, my growth is stepping beyond that, trusting in life itself. I don't think that we trust enough in life itself. It's not about trusting other people. Oh, that's a really good idea too if you find people you can trust. But beyond that, it's trusting in life itself. It's trusting that we get to step forth in an awakened way, which will, of course, still have us in that place of compassion, of care, of love. This is not about not caring. This is not about that it doesn't matter. Each and every one of us gets to choose what matters. What matters for you, I promise, is not the same thing that matters for me. It's not the same thing that matters for them or for you or anybody else in here. We all have our own sense of what matters, and it's okay. You really get to have that. Just know that it's your choice and you're making it up. It's not intrinsic. There's nothing intrinsic going on here. We get born, we have our time here, we die. That's intrinsic. Nobody's figured out how to change that particular piece yet. That doesn't mean at some point they might. I don't know if I've even wanted if they did. I'm really good with the excitement of being here for the time I'm here. But you got to choose that for yourself. But in this, know that you're making a choice of how you're looking at life, what you think is true. And that there's always more going on, but it's up to you to take the look at it. And that's what I'm doing. I am looking deep into what is true for me around what I want my experience to be in this life, and I am really tired of managing and don't think it's actually all that useful. And so that's my next step. I'm telling you all because you can all hold me accountable and let me know, wait a minute, Cliff, you're managing again. Because that's what we do as community, right? We step up for each other and are willing to point out, because I'm not perfect. If you're expecting me to be perfect, I'm going to break that expectation, right? But I would love the support, and that's what we do for each other. I know that some people, they don't want that kind of support. They don't like people who point out to them, wait a minute, this isn't what you said you wanted. But I'm one of the people that actually does. I'm happy to have it pointed out to me. And I recommend it. I recommend it as a way of being and looking at what's getting in your way of getting the support to have people remind you of standing in the place you want to stand, that you said you wanted to stand, right? Because that's what we're dealing with here. is all of us wanting to evolve into that vision we have of who we are. And then sometimes what we have is all the reasons why we can't be that. Or am I the only one who does that? Right? So we want to get beyond our reasons to get to a place so that life can be more awe and wonder. Less suffering, more awe and wonder. Less suffering, more awe and wonder. And I thought about Kahlil Gibran. This is particular about kids. And on children, he talks about how the parents are the bows and the kids are the arrows. And I've been alive long enough now to watch 2 generations grow up. And from what I can see, there's still, the critical mass has not reached where people are actually taking their bows and shooting their kids. The arrows are landing like right at their feet. And so we have kids who behave just like their parents, who then have kids who behave just like their parents. Instead of trusting in life enough to shoot them further than we can even imagine, that the thoughts and things they come up with are beyond our own ability to see. Like Kahlil Gibran says, we cannot go where they go. Well, we can if we only let the arrows winding up here, but then we haven't shot it out. And I'm not saying that any of you have done that. I think that I did that with my kid. I didn't shoot the arrow. It landed pretty close. But we get to take a look at that and see for the next generation and the next generation. Can we set up, because one time they thought the world was flat. And then all of a sudden critical mass hit and they knew it was round. Well, right now we think this is where the veil is. We think what's going on in the world is what it is. But if we keep shooting our kids and we keep looking at beyond the veil, we'll have an opportunity at some point down the road. I don't know how long, 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, whatever it takes, it's still worth the journey for those of us who are brave enough to take that first step, to step into that place of there's something more going on here than what it looks like. And if we can open to that, then our kids or our kids' kids or our kids' kids' kids will finally see that the world is round. That there is a consciousness going on that is much larger than what we can see. That can create a world that is actually what we all dream of. But what it takes is awakening. Like Ash said last week in her quote from Carl Jung, when we look outside ourselves, we're dreaming. When we look inside, we are awakening. And it is in that awakened state that we can truly make change in this world. Thank you. I love you so much.